2026 is going to be an awesome year. We got some pretty cool stuff coming up. First off, we got Foundations of Recovery. This is our flagship program. We're starting it in January.
This is for anyone, man, woman, or couple, who wants to come and reclaim their heart from shame, trauma, and betrayal. We start off with an education on all sorts of principles, give you the common language. We feed you from a fire hose in terms of all things recovery.
It is such a great start to recovery. And we get at the roots of things, Tyler. This isn't like any other program. Like, this is our healing journey in process, and Foundations is where we begin.
If you look at the value that you're getting there to kick off a good recovery with all of the right education, all of the right language, and a team to get you started while also being directed by Brannon and myself through the whole process, what a deal.
So if you're interested, if you're struggling, if you've been wanting to do something for a long time, jump into this. This only comes around every so often, and we would love to have you there.
Click the link in the description to sign up for it. And to make it even sweeter, we're also including a raffle for a free pass to the Radiant Dawn retreat. Anyone who signs up for Foundations will be added to the raffle for that free Radiant Dawn pass. If you're a man and you sign up for Foundations, your name still gets entered, and you can give that pass away if you win it to any woman that you want to.
So what you're saying, Tyler, is if you sign up and participate in Foundations, you could possibly go to Radiant Dawn for free?
That's exactly what I'm saying, which is crazy because Foundations by itself is already an insane value.
Man, I sound so salesy. But it actually is awesome. So come to Foundations. And even if you don't come to Foundations, sign up for Radiant Dawn. It's beyond therapy, the best healing experiences that you can have.
Click the link below and come join us. How do I find good therapy? Welcome to the Therapy Brothers podcast.
I'm Brannon.
I'm Tyler.
We're brothers.
We're therapists.
And we know recovery.
Bring your stories, your questions, your successes with real recovery.
Hey, Tyler, you ready to have some hard conversations?
Let's do it.
Let the Therapy Brothers podcast begin.
What's going on, you guys? Tyler, your wandering therapist here. I'm going solo today. Brannon had a kind of a cool opportunity come up. We'll see if anything comes to fruition with it, but that means that you guys are stuck with me again alone. And I know that that's from the polls that I've taken. I think every time I take the polls, whether it's at the retreats or, my daughter, Lexi, she happened to be at my last retreat, and she just kind of heard, as she's mingling with all the other ladies that were at the retreat, she said, "Dad, I think you're shooting about 40% and Brannon's shooting about 60 on being the favorite brother." And I said, okay, well, at least there's 40% out there that resonate with some of the things I have to say. So to the 60%, I apologize. But we just really quickly just mention again, we mentioned it a couple of times. We're in the process right now of having a drawing for a pass to our next Rising Sun retreat. One free pass. I think it's an insane value if you were to win this thing, because not just because of what it costs to go buy it on your own, but because of what it will provide and what it will offer to whoever comes. If you'd like a chance to be entered into a drawing for a pass to the Rising Sun retreat, and if you're a woman, you can win it still and give it to any man in your life that you want to. All you have to do is go to therapybros.com, sign up to be a caller, set a date to be a caller. It doesn't even have to be a date that's before the retreat. You just have to sign up before July 31st. And the reason we're doing this is because we're always talking. Every time we talk to a caller, we're like, oh, you should think about this, or you should do this. And we want to be able to give something back, especially for the people who have the courage to come on and share themselves the way that they do. So this is one way we're trying to do that. So we have a return caller today. She's actually getting kind of both of us separately. She was on with an episode just with Brannon not too long ago, and now she's back, and somehow she got stuck with just me. So now she's getting both, I guess. But Carrie, welcome back. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me again.
Yeah, you bet. Kind of just jump in a little bit. I think people, if they wanted to, they can go back and listen to your other episode, but give whatever background will be important for me to be able to help you, and that will lead into your question. And let's dive into it.
Well, just disclosure, I'm probably in the 60 and the 40%. I jump back and forth between you guys. Sometimes Brannon will say something and I get real upset. I'm like, I don't like that. Sometimes you say something. I'm like, I don't know how I feel about that. But when I sit with it, so if you don't like what he's saying, just sit with it a little longer and you'll start to. But when I was on last towards the end, Brannon said he asked if I had a good therapist, and I don't. And he said, well, if you need a good one that'll like kick your ass, let me know. And I probably should have just taken him up on that. Because after I got off the call, I was like, maybe I started looking for a therapist here locally where I live. Because Zoom is great because you have like the world at your fingertips for resources, but there's just something about being in person with somebody. So I went and found a therapist, and I have just really struggled to find one for myself. My husband struggled. We've struggled to find one for our kids. So I'm kind of just like, I want to share some of those struggles and just kind of get your tips and like what we can do on our end to make sure we're lining up well with you. This last therapist I went and found, I pretty much interviewed him that first, because people do like a 15-minute consult, right? And I was like, hey, I'm not looking to mess around. Like, I've done a lot of therapy. Like, I know what needs to be looked at, and I just need some help diving in. And he was like, all right, like, I'm here for it. And we've had 3 or 4 sessions now, and I still feel like we're just in that conversation stage where I get in, he's like, how was your week? Well, tell me more about that. And I left this last time going, I caught myself more in things I was saying or trying to distract myself from going deeper. And he just kind of like, there was even a moment where the therapist kind of like like I kind of tested him. Like I really put out like, hey, this is something that is not going well in my life. And he kind of just blew over it. And I was like, all right, like maybe this just isn't a good fit. But I've spent $600 now trying to find out that this isn't a good fit. And then my husband did the same thing. He had a therapist that he was meeting with, and it was like the 4th time, and we were talking about like what he was doing with this therapist. And this therapist, like both of them are EMDR, like do the DBT, like they do a lot of different things, right? But we never got into the meat of that. So my husband ended up he went to that therapist and said, hey, I'm looking for more. I want to do some EMDR. I want to do this. I want to look at these things. And they ended up parting ways in that conversation because the therapist was just like, well, maybe I'm not a good fit and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay. So I just am like struggling because even my daughter, she'll come out of therapy and I'm like, so what did you guys do? And she's like, we just talked. And I'm like, about what? You know? So, and I've done a lot of different types of therapy. And I really would just love that if someone could just bring it all together, really. So I guess I'm just looking for, on your end as a therapist, what are tips you can give clients and people to like really narrow in and find somebody? Or are there really crappy therapists out there? You just really got to dig through the haystack to find a good one.
Yeah. Okay. This is a great topic, and it actually maybe it goes along really well with what I was saying earlier about the 60-40 thing jokingly is that some of that might actually have some truth to it. But before we jump into anything and deeper into this discussion, if you don't mind, Carrie, can you just kind of give a little bit of background? You said you've done a lot of different kinds of therapy. You've been with a lot of therapists. Would you mind just sharing some of that experience in terms of what you've experienced, what wasn't, the parts that haven't been helpful, the parts that have been, even what keeps you even coming back?
Trauma issues. I mean, my husband and I are separated right now. We have been since January. And every time we try and do couples therapy or anything, the couples therapist is like, he's got to get right. But as he heals and does his thing, I find like, okay, like I really don't know if I want him to even hold my heart. That's an issue. So does that make sense? So just as we're always healing, we're always growing. So stuff always keeps coming up, and mine aren't just like these little tiny, like I'm overwhelmed and stressed in life. Like, yeah, that's a big one. But once you work through overwhelm and stress in life, there's more. There's always layers. There's always something. So the first time I did therapy, I went to traditional therapy, and the gal, we actually become really good friends now. So she kind of is like, ethically, I don't know if we should like go there again, because I saw her and then I didn't see her for like 2 years. And then she sees my brother and my dad and just a lot of people. And she's referred me to other people. And she does like traditional therapy, and she does some EMDR and things like that. And then I actually had my brother pass away in 2020, and that kind of opened up the whole world of like energy healing for me. And that has been where I have found a lot of success with that, because we so often just like the energies are there. And I was thinking about this the other day. When you can release the energy of the thing, it's easier to kind of talk about, because there's not so much like friction and tension around it, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But there's still, if we can't get like our energy and that stuff, the emotions and feelings kind of cleared, and then our conscious and our subconscious all kind of working together to clear those things out, it's just one or the other is going to pull it back. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So like I can release the energy of something, but then if I have a habit or a pattern that is bringing that energy back in, I'm just going to end up in the same space. And same thing, I can go look at a limiting belief, but if I'm holding the energy of whatever still, it doesn't go. So it's almost like, yeah, I feel like I need to kind of marry the two. And I actually have a therapist that I feel like does that, but my husband's seeing her right now. And the modality she uses is fantastic. And I know the modality and I like practice it and like do it on clients. But I just, seeing her right now while she's seeing him, I just would like to give him the space to go do some of that deep work. And not that she has a problem with it and neither does he, but I almost just feel like I don't want to, I don't know, get in the mix of it. Just kind of really let them have that. Because he's got some deep stuff he's got to go through. And it's been cool though, because she's been able to reach out with his permission and say, hey, this energy was holding for both of you, and talk to me through some things. But I haven't gone back to her for like an actual session since he's worked with her. I've done hypnotherapy. I did a plant medicine journey early in 2020 before my brother passed, and all this stuff with my husband got reignited. And that was cool because it pulled some deep stuff out, but I don't want to do that all the time. And I don't think you have to. Yeah. So that's kind of some of the things I've done.
Okay. So you've done things like EMDR, energy work, hypnotherapy, plant medicine, talk therapy.
And I've done like the parts work and the IFS and a lot of like the tools that are used in DBT. Like I'm real familiar with a lot of those. So in
like
fact,
skills.
I went into the therapist and I intentionally at that one was like, basically handed him the information to hand me the skill to work through it, the thing. And he was just like, oh, well, that must be hard. And I was like, okay. So, and I even told him flat out, like, here's the things I want to look at and work on. And it was still just, so I'm just curious, like, why are trained therapists in the field not actually doing the work?
That's a good question. It's a really good question. And I think it's, I'm so glad you're on here today, because I think there's probably a lot of other people right now listening going, that's kind of been my experience too. Like, I don't know how to find good therapy. I don't know how to find the right fit, that kind of a thing. And what you'll hear in like kind of blanket statements all the time is like, especially in the world of what we do with like betrayal trauma and sex addiction and infidelity and things, is usually the blanket statement is find a CSAT and then work with them. Right. Mm-hmm. And the reason why that advice is given is because that's at least hitting a part of what you'd hope to hit, which is at least a CSAT should have some kind of expertise in the field of what you're trying to work on. Right. But that's too much of a blanket statement, given that there's so many other factors that go into what makes good therapy. So I can appreciate that you're stepping out a little bit with the therapist that was working for you for the space of your husband. It kind of depends on every therapist, whether or not they feel comfortable working individually with both sides of a couple. And if you find something that's working, there's nothing wrong with letting that work. Right. But if you need to give that space, that's fine too, I guess.
Well, and he's working with her and a CSAT, so he's getting both.
Okay.
Which I think has been really helpful. But even his CSAT, we asked, one of the other questions I had was like, we're working through a separation and kind of like wondering the next steps. And when my husband went to the CSAT, he was just like, well, the longer you're separated, the harder it is to come back together. And my husband's like, okay, well, what are the next steps? And then nothing.
Yeah.
And so that I got real frustrated over that for like a month or so. And then I later realized my husband like got an answer and he just didn't tell me what the answer was. And I was like, oh, well, okay, maybe he's not like, because I was kind of like cursing his name for a while. Like, you need a new CSAT. Like, he's not the greatest, but it really was another underlying issue. But he's wanted to like reach out and talk with me, his CSAT. But again, it's not that I'm against working with someone my husband's working with. I just would love that, like that safety net of our own people holding our own space during this process, because it's intense.
For sure. And I think whether you get that through another therapist or you piece that together through people that you build a team with, or maybe it's somebody in a group or something, it's vitally important to have that safe space for your own individual stuff. I actually feel like, one of the precursors to this that seems to work best for most couples, if I could just speak to the whole coming back from separation thing really briefly, and we won't hit the whole thing yet, but is that it really matters for both members of that relationship to have healthy people that they fall into when the work with each other starts to break. So as you start to lean back into each other and have to address some of these core issues that are like, hey, there's some stuff from the past here we still need to make some peace with, or there's these issues that we haven't quite ever really addressed yet. If you don't have a good fallback, then leaning in, trying to fix it, and then having it break really far every time is going to do more damage to the relationship than good.
Well, and I just see like, this is why I like both of you a lot, because I feel like Brannon and I are going to, like, he goes a little like he's off the rails sometimes, and he'll go like, I'm a devil's advocate, but you're really good at like how Christ taught was through parables. So even as people who are just listening to the podcast, as he was talking, he kind of had his hands going like a triangle, and I just see it like a mountain. And if we've got our support team that's there, they're going to catch us so that we don't fall all the way back down to the bottom of the mountain. That's just, as you were speaking, and your hands, I was like, oh, that's like so we're not falling as far. We've got that support system keeping us building towards the relationship. So I like to think
that's exactly right. So I'll give you like an example of this principle and how it would play out in trying to reattach to each other. Is if I'm working my own recovery and I'm actually starting to grow in my honesty, my integrity, my strength, my love for self, my relationship with God, and I'm growing that way, I'm naturally then wanting to show up differently in my relationship with my partner. And yet when I go to my partner, there's going to be the old stuff that is still there that hasn't been navigated. We call them the raw spots. That's going to be the things where it's like,
yeah.
Maybe unintentionally trigger her pain somehow, but then she's going to go, geez, Tyler, you always do this, or you never do this, or da 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 da. And if I'm not careful, I'm going to dip back into my shame, and then I'm going to roll down the hill further, and I'll probably do more damage by doing any of the shame screens where I'll blame her or I'll pull away but if I fall and my team is there and I go reach out to them, I'm like, hey, I was trying to do this. My wife said this, what's going on? And the team is like, hey, dude, nice job. Like, number one, good job, way to work. Number two, you probably could have done it differently this way.
Yeah.
We just had an awesome conversation in one of my groups just this last week about a guy who's like got such a good heart, so well intended, and he tried to do something good for his relationship, but he did it in such a weird, dishonest way. There was like, the group was there to like grab him and be like, good job, your heart's in the right spot, but from now on you got to do it this way instead of that way. And he's like, oh, okay. Like, if he doesn't have that, he's already back on the road to a massive betrayal that's going to end up just obliterating whatever shreds of hope there are left.
Right.
And so that's part of the work. And again, I know I'm getting sidetracked on this idea of how to come back together, but that is a pivotal part. Is like, I love what you said. If we're both doing our own work, part of that will be the team that catches us and pushes us up. Catch and push, catch and push. And they're pushing you back into the game with your partner, rather than like, if that's what you're trying to do as a partnership, is figure it out, rather than, get rid of him, he's terrible, whatever else. Right. So, and that kind of goes into the realm of what I think is good help with therapy too, is that I believe that at least a very beginning part of any good therapist is figuring out how to ride the line of trying to point out the truth, press for change, but always respect the agency of the client. Because at the end of the day, the client is the one who gets to own their life and make their own decisions. And so if you're with a therapist who is either too soft on one side of that or too hard on the other side of that, that's probably not going to be a good fit. Mm-hmm. So if you go into a therapist every single week and all you ever get is like, you're amazing, you're awesome, like, I'm so glad you're sharing today, and oh, wow, that sounds... It's your life, like, whatever. Well, that's probably a little too far one end. But if you go in and the therapist is like, you need to leave him tomorrow. Well, that might not be right either, because then you're going to feel coerced. But somewhere in the middle, that therapist needs to say, hey, these patterns don't seem very healthy. Mm-hmm. What are you doing to protect yourself? And what decisions do you need to make? Right? Now that's putting a little bit of press for you to change and own your own choices, but it's also having the therapist share some of the expertise that you hired them to share.
Right.
And so that's maybe the first thing that I would say is, in finding good therapy, you're actually looking for someone who will balance the push for change and the acceptance piece. Mm-hmm. And if you're not getting one or the other, you're probably not getting the full amount out of your therapy. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. I think that's why I remember listening to one of your guys' podcasts a year or so ago. And I was just like, man, if I could just pay to have both of them be my therapist at the same time, because that balance is there between, like, I don't know what each of you are individually like in your practices, but like, I feel like Brannon's pushing the things a little bit and you're like, okay, well, how do we look at that? And what do we, you know what I mean? Like, there's such a good balance between the two of you. And that's why I think so many people, I enjoy coming on and listening, because you get a lot out of both. I haven't got both of you at the same time. So, but I see other people get it. And I think it's just a beautiful thing, because you need to find someone that can push you to look at the stuff, but then hold the space and give you the tools as well to get through it. So yeah, I get what you're saying for sure.
Yeah. When we were very first kind of starting our own practices, Brannon had called me and said, hey, Tyler, let's start a practice. He had already started a practice and he was doing online therapy and he was running groups. And he said, Tyler, why don't you come be my co-therapist in this group? And it became very quickly apparent that, like, we kind of, at this time, we were brand new in the arena of this work. So we were both pretty fresh and, like, you know, doing the best we could. But it became very plainly apparent that Brannon every week was the bad cop and I was the good cop. And it was just like this balance back and forth. And half of the time, Brannon and I would get into like some discussion with each other about this guy's issues. And I'd be like, Brannon, you got to soften up here. And he's like, Tyler, like, he's got to, like, you know, get after it here. And it's like, well, as we've grown as therapists, I think both of us have seen the value of somewhere in the middle. And I think you're right. Brannon tends to lean a little bit more on that, hey, like, directive. And I tend to lean a little bit more on the side of, let's help you figure out what's right for you. But it takes both. And so whichever part of the scale, as long as you find someone that's in the middle that way, and then has that line up with like your own personal sort of style and personality, that matters too.
Yeah.
So, so maybe if it's okay with you, I'd like to go through just a couple of principles, what I think entails finding the right fit for a therapist. And then maybe we can jump back into it and apply it to some of your life situation, even with this, you know, the separation piece.
Cool.
Every single call includes what I'm going to give you right now. And that's this, that there's research that backs this up, that the most pivotal thing that will make your therapy either a like positive and effective experience or a negative experience is the actual therapeutic relationship you have with your therapist. So it doesn't really matter, particularly the modalities that they use. What matters is the actual relationship that gets developed with the therapist. And
just because I'm not a trained therapist, but even in my life coaching, the first thing you do is you build that rapport. So with therapy, is there like a longer period to build that rapport, or are you just taught to kind of gauge that, or is there like a black and white that they teach you and people aren't stepping in and tuning in? That's my question on that. Because I kind of feel like, am I just discounting these therapists too quickly because I feel like they're trying to build rapport longer than my patience is letting me?
That could be a possibility, and that would be something that you might even ask the therapist when you're visiting with them, because typically speaking, everyone's a little bit different, but typically speaking, and this is kind of how I manage it for myself, is that on a very first session, I don't have any currency with the client yet to be able to push them really hard without developing some level of trust, right? And one of the best ways to there's a couple of ways that you develop trust. One is by showing understanding, desire to understand, empathy, and then also establishing that you have the expertise to help them with the specific issue that they're looking for. So that might happen oftentimes in a single first session. You hear somebody's story, you can show that you understand and that you're seeking to understand them, and you can also show them that there's a pathway through, and they'll walk out of there after a first session and go like, oh, that's like a breath of fresh air. Like, somebody understood me. Like, I'm not crazy. I'm not alone. I'm not bad. Like, somebody understands, right? That might be enough trust already established after one session that the very next session you can kind of dive in and I kind of look at it as like a bank account ledger, where how much trust do I have with the person? Because the more that I have, the more I can push. And there's some people that I've been working with now that they trust the relationship so much that I can spend a lot of my time on the push part, the change part. Like, hey, like, even like a lot of times, say a betrayed spouse, oftentimes it's so hard for them just to come in the door because, number one, it's not their issue, and number two, it's not their fault. And like, why do they have to be here? And, and nobody really understands. But even with like a lot of the betrayed spouses that I work with now, they're ready now to hear, hey, you need to take a look at that. Like, it's not working for you anymore. You need to change this pattern. And they'll eat it up and go, yeah, you're right. I need to look at that. If I do that on a first session, they're gone. They're never coming back. Right?
See, and I'm the person that's the opposite, because I feel like I trust so deeply so quickly until you give me a reason not to.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So I even went into this therapist and I was like, I'm ready. Like, I wouldn't be here in this first session if that 15 minutes, if I was off put or whatever. Right.
Right.
So I get that not everybody's that way. So I just need to keep that in mind, that on your end as a therapist, you're really wanting to be secure in that bank ledger because you are invested in our healing, not just in, and a lot of people I think like, well, they're just pushing it and long-terming it out for more money. Because a lot of people feel that way. So,
yeah, for sure. Absolutely. And the process, especially depending on what processes you get engaged in, it does draw itself out and can be a long-term thing sometimes. Yeah. And you want to make sure that you feel like you're growing all along that way. And if you're not, then it's time to start looking at something different. But yeah, so for you to be honest with that therapist and say, hey, like, I'm ready for the real stuff. Like, we don't have to build a bunch of trust. Cool. He should be able to jump back in there. And that's a gift you're offering him. And it's also a gift you're offering yourself because you're going to weed through that a lot faster and find if it's a right fit for you or not. So
is that weird to just go and be like, hey, I trust you, let's move forward? Is that awkward? What would you do?
Well, I don't think it's, like I said, I don't think it's weird at all. And I actually think that it's a gift that you're offering yourself and the therapist if you go in and say, hey, I know there's a lot of different styles here. My style is this way. Can you do that for me? And if they say yes, but then they're not doing it, then it's time to move on. And if they say yes and they're doing it, then what you just did is you just weeded out a couple of sessions worth of, building trust or whatever.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
So, yeah. So that's a great question that you ask. So a couple of principles here really quickly with what makes the right fit for therapy. Number one, of course, is you want to make sure that you research somebody who does have some kind of expertise in the kind of work that you want to do. So whether that's energy work or whether that's betrayal trauma or whether that's EMDR, it is important to find someone who has a knowledge of the kind of problem that you're working through. And here's where I think a lot of therapists actually go wrong is that, if you go, if you go to like Psychology Today and you try to look up therapists, if you find a therapist that's like, I treat everything, I do this and I do this and I do this and I do this, and if they have like 100 things that they treat, I personally am not looking for that therapist. I'm looking for the therapist that's like, I treat trauma, I treat betrayal, I treat infidelity, I treat addictions, and these are the ways that I treat them. And that way I know that if I'm going to that therapist, they're spending their time and their energy and even their own resources on mastering the craft of those specific kinds of things, rather than just, hey, I need clients, so I take everybody.
Right.
So if you call a therapist and they're like, that's not really my niche, you'd be better off with this therapist down the road. I'm actually, that therapist just gained credibility with me for my friends and family who have that niche, because they're willing to push somebody else who's not the perfect client to the better help that they can get. So finding a therapist that has that specific kind of expertise is really important. The second part that I think is just as important, and this is what happens in a 15-minute call or a first session, and these are the kinds of questions that as a client would be wise to ask, is values-based questions. You know, if I'm going to a therapist to try to work on saving my marriage, and my therapist actually has a tendency to not really value marriage, then that value difference is going to be the wrong kind of friction for the work that I want to do. Or, you know, I remember being in graduate school and I was working with a couple who was having some rough time connecting sexually. And in graduate school, they had this like one-way mirror so the team could look through, but the client can't see the team. And then they had this phone. And I was working with this client, this couple, and I'm trying to work with them on how to communicate better and things. And I get this buzz from the phone from my professor. And the professor is like, hey, Tyler, you need to prescribe them to watch some pornography together. And I was like, I can't do that. Like that's against my values, right?
Yeah.
I don't think I'm going to be helpful if I do that. So I ended up getting a bad grade in that practicum class. But that was my value system. And so a client that's coming through the door needs to know that I'm not the kind of therapist who's going to say, hey, go explore your sexuality through the use of pornography. That's just not in my value system. And if I try to do therapy with a client who wants to go do those things, I'm going to cause friction and not help them on their path. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so much. Yeah.
So you want to ask the right kinds of questions. You know, what kind of principles do you operate from? You know, sometimes, you know, in our practice, we openly say, hey, we are a Christian-based counseling practice, which means you're going to get a lot of those kinds of Christian values and principles here. And we purposely say that out front because we don't want people coming and saying, hey, that's not what I need, or that's not what I want. It's like, okay, fine, we'll help you find somebody else that will fit better for you. So does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Because you don't want to, perfect example. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the third thing that I would say, and this is also part of the feeling out process, is the relationship itself has to have a couple of components in order for it to be ideal. And one is, personality-wise, we don't have to get along and be best friends, but I have to get a sense that my therapist genuinely cares about me. If I don't feel like they genuinely care, if it feels like I'm just a number or just an appointment or just like an object, then that human component doesn't shine through in the therapy, and that human component really matters. So you want to make sure that personality-wise, you merge just enough and that you feel like you're genuinely cared about as a person with your therapist. And a lot of therapists, they get into that grind and they're just going through the motions and they forget to include the actual human element. So, and then the last one I mentioned earlier is the therapist should make sure that they're balancing push for change while also respecting your agency. And at the end of the day, they're helping you take ownership of your life. They're not trying to control you in your life.
Yeah.
So thoughts about any of that?
I know, I love it all. I think that making sure that they're qualified in your area is huge, because there's so many people who are like, they might be able to work with all of it, but it's that, like, you're not going to call a handyman to plumb your whole house. You're going to call a plumber. You know what I mean? You don't want someone who's kind of like, what is it, jack of all trades, master of none, when you're diving into your trauma. Like, you want someone I love that. And then the value base. Like, I don't know that I've really looked at like the values of the people that I think it's just God's kind of placed them like that way. Like, as far like even like the energy healers I've gone to, like, I grew up LDS, but I've left the religion, but I still am very grounded in Christ. And my energy healers and my shamans and all of that have been LDS. So knowing that they're grounded and have those values has been like something I've just been gifted to be able to not have to, I guess, work against or fight through. So, but we did have one lady that came in that you could tell she kind of was just like not pro marriage. She was very just like pro standing in your own truth and forget it if people can't get in line. And that didn't work very well. So yeah, I think that really, at what point as a client I don't want to say okay or safe or good to just kind of be like, this isn't working, because so many people will get to that point of like, the therapist is brushing up again, they're getting ready to step over that line to cross you and push you into that trauma. And a lot of people are just like, this isn't working. Like, I don't want to do that for myself, as well as like my daughter's therapist. Like, there was one, she was just not feeling. And later when I visited with the therapist, it was because she was starting to push her to actually look at that part. And that part showed up and was like, get out, fire, run, fire her, like literally. What are some like tips to stay in the game and not blame the therapist?
That's a good
that makes sense.
That's a great question. And I would say it's kind of like it's like a dance, I think, what I'm hearing you describe, and clarify it for me if I'm missing it, okay? Is some people, when therapy gets uncomfortable, they say that that's the friction and they need to leave. Mm-hmm. When in reality, the therapy getting uncomfortable is what they needed. And, you know, so there's the friction in values that needs to probably not be a good fit. But then there's the friction in the push for change that is a good fit. And you want to make sure that you're being honest with yourself as to, why is this thing not sitting well with me right now with whatever the therapist just said? Is it because it's actually pressing on things that I need to take a look at? Or is it because it truly is like just a misalignment of the way that we see the world? And that's probably not going to change right now or in the near future. I would also say, like with your, like with your daughter, how old's your daughter?
11.
11. Okay. Is she just doing kind of basic talk therapy with somebody right now, or?
She's done both. So she's got like a life coach that does some more like different styles of releasing things that really work with kids. And then the school districts, actually, this is a fun thing. If your child's really struggling, the school districts have a grant to help get you outside therapy. So that's what happened towards the end of the school year. She was struggling and they were like, we will pay for 4 therapy sessions. And I was like, incredible. That's awesome. So she does talk therapy. And this lady doesn't like specialize in EMDR or anything like that. But I mean, she had really high credentials and a lot of good references. And I spoke with her before, and my daughter feels comfortable in there. I just don't feel like I'm seeing the growth. And I'm big on like the work is done between your sessions. So if you're not getting tools or getting something to kind of like look at or like do in between, you're wasting a week. That's just my thought and how I function. So when she comes out of that and I'm like, well, what are you doing this week? And she's like, nothing. I'm like, well, what did you guys talk about? She's like, yeah, we played Trouble. I'm like, oh, all right. Well, I guess at least I'm not paying for it, but there has been things that she has gained from it. I think I'm a type A. I'm like, let's get it. Let's face it. Let's get through it. And my husband and my daughter aren't actually. So that's probably the therapist is just what my husband and daughter can allow. But a therapist that's going to like pick me up and push me through. You just almost project to remember that too. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I lost you for probably 2 or 3 sentences there, so I'm not sure exactly if I heard what you said. Maybe just restate the very last point you were making.
Just that I'm projecting the type of therapy I want on my husband and my daughter.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that might be
That makes sense.
That could be part of it, but I also think like
I just kind of processed through that. That's what I was doing, being impatient with their therapist.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point though, that, working with a kid especially, like sometimes that movement kind of stuff helps keep the child open to talking and keeping things going. But you could also very easily fall into the trap of playing trouble every week. And then that's not really why you're going either. So I would suggest something, and this is just another thing that is maybe my own personal bias, so you can chalk it up as possible personal bias. And that is that, especially with kids, but even as an adult, but especially with kids, like if I'm sending my children to some place for some therapy, I'm looking for something that's experientially oriented. I'm looking for art therapy. I'm looking for horse therapy. I'm looking for actual EMDR kinds of stuff, because otherwise it can very easily fall into that place of I just want to talk. And sometimes did I lose you?
Yeah, well, I lost you for a minute. I don't know if it's yours or mine, but now I can't see you at all, so I don't know.
Okay, you have the audio still?
Yeah, the audio's
okay.
there.
Hopefully it'll come back here. But did you hear what I just said about experience therapy especially for the kids?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I got parts of it enough that I can get what you're saying. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So your original question was, at what point do I just have feedback with or from the therapist about whether or not this is working? And I think that can be an ongoing thing inside of that therapeutic relationship. And it's okay. Like I actually, even though it sometimes is hard, it's my job as a therapist to be there to work with and for my clients. And so it's a gift if a client comes in and says, "Hey, this isn't working properly." And a good therapist sometimes will actually do that in reverse. As a therapist, if I'm looking at my schedule and I'm seeing somebody on my schedule, I'm like, "Oh man, this is going to be a rough session. This person burns me out," or whatever. It's on me as a therapist in that session to go to them and say, "Hey, I'm feeling a little bit burned out, and here's the reasons why. We either need to solve how I can continue to help you properly, or we need to get you a better fit or better help." And I would bet that in all of your experience, you've never had a therapist say or do that.
Actually, the one that became my friend, she was like, I was like buckled down in my childhood trauma, like sitting on my hands. I was not going there. And she was just like, if you're not ready to push through this, then you either need to find someone else or, she did. And I was just like, oh, okay. And I went back to her 2 more times, like, just because it build trust. Like, she was like, hey, you're ready. Like, you're safe. You're all these things. But if this just isn't time for this to go, or I'm not the person, then you need to find someone else. So I've only had one time. And that's why I've taken everybody. I refer everyone to her. I mean, she saw my brother for 2 years. She sees my dad now. She sees a lot of my friends' kids. Like, she's really good at what she does. It just wasn't the time for me to look at that thing.
There's trust in that when a therapist has the confidence to do that, right? Yeah. And I've had that same thing happen. I remember doing a therapy session with a couple one time, and about 20 minutes into the session, I could tell that I was not the right fit for them. I was just, our values were not going to line up, and I knew that I wasn't the right fit. And so we visited and finished the session. At the end of the session, I kind of said, "You guys, you will not like what you get from me. You're going to do far better if you go to this other therapist. And I gave them an outside referral, and they were mad at me, actually. They were like, no, we want to. I'm like, no, this isn't a good fit. Like, go see them first and see how that fits. And I never, ever heard from them. And then over the years, the next couple of years, 3 or 4 times, I would get a call from a different person, and they'd say, hey, so-and-so referred you and said you're the best. And I'm like, and I can't say it, but I'm like, yeah, I've only had one session with them, and I turned them away. You know?
Yeah.
But they got the sense of fit, and they're like, oh, okay, these friends of ours would fit really well with him. We didn't, and they could appreciate that there was, and this is something that you look for in a therapist. The therapist needs to have enough confidence in who they are and what they can do, so that you feel their strength and you know that they've got a place that they can take you. If the therapist is clinging to you, like, hey, please don't leave, like, da-da-da-da-da, like, then that's more about the therapist's issues than it is about you getting better. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, have we even hit on any of the stuff you wanted to hit on today yet, Carrie?
Yeah, I think it's a process. But it's still like, why aren't there good therapists? I guess is another good question. And it makes me nervous going into a space of like, we've struggled over the years to find good therapy, and some of our marriage issues are deep. But when it's time for a couples therapist, like, I don't have the support down the hill to keep me from falling all the way down. And that's part of it. I recognize, like, I'm at a point where I'm like, I'm just going to turn it off. Like, you don't get to hold my heart. We're going to stay in this as friends. Like, I love you, but I'm not in love with you, and I don't trust you. Like, I know what mine are, but I don't have anyone catching me. Does that make sense? Uh-huh. And so I worry that, like, now you add the element of the relationship in, and now we got to go find a couples therapist too. So it's really, like, I don't know. It's a struggle. And I know I'm not alone, because so many people just won't go to therapy because it takes so long to find someone that you fit with or actually feel like you're moving forward. Yes.
I hear your frustration 100%. And I mean, I'm a therapist. I'm a believer in what we do, and I believe that there's a lot of good that comes from it. I do believe that the wrestle, and this is what's so hard about it, the wrestle to find the right fit really does matter. And here in my valley where I live, there's probably well over 300 therapists that any person could go to on any given day, just here in Little Cache Valley, Utah, let alone wherever you live, right? And that can feel overwhelming. And that's why, like, I tell my clients all the time, it's worth it to set aside whatever budget you have to at least go to 3 or 4 different therapists for an intake, and then decide if any of them fit those criteria that I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
And if you do, then stick with them for a little bit. If they don't, then pick another one, and make sure you're sifting through that pretty quickly in a first or second session, so you're not spending more resource than you need to.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, Carrie, about your situation personally right now.
Well, I just had a thought when you were talking. I'm like, someone should create a speed dating of therapists. Like, I'd pay $200 to go in and sit for 10 minutes with 20 therapists, because then I'd at least have 5. So someone out there's a great business idea.
That is actually, that is a great business idea. I know that there's some research that's being done right now, but it's incomplete on the stuff we've been talking about, of how to match up the therapist with the client with some of those factors that I mentioned, values and things like that too. And you're right. That would be a brilliant business idea.
That'd be rad. Well, maybe I'll start it or not. Yeah. They're welcome. So.
Well, there's so many people that are in your same boat that I think it really is true. So you've done a lot of things. I'm wondering if, for you, getting bang for your buck right now with where things are at for you is, I don't know, do you have like are you in any groups, or do you have any other team members besides therapists?
I've got a good group at my church, and a lot of them actually, like, God really placed me with this group of women, because we all have similar things in background, and can push each other. And so but outside of that, like a betrayal, trauma, like any of that, no. And I haven't really, like, I've tried, we've got a couple groups here where I meet, but they meet at times that I can't get to. And I've thought about, like, maybe I just host my own during the day, because I don't work. So when my kids are at school, I've got time during the day. And I'm like, I know I'm not alone. Like, if I could host a 10 o'clock, meeting, then maybe. But even those meetings, I don't feel like, again, you've got to find the right meeting with the right people. And not always the meeting content always isn't great. So long answer is no.
Yeah, you're right. And it can be frustrating to keep going back and trying to develop those things when you've tried over and over again. It doesn't seem to quite fit. But I wonder, like, what in my practice, it seems to work this way a lot, where people will come in and they'll do their individual kinds of work. They'll do their healing, their EMDR stuff. Your husband would start working on his recovery and kind of get some feet under some ground under his feet there. And then most often what happens in my practice is that the group work on both sides almost takes on a lot of that individual kind of work. And then they come together and do their couples work in that, like, therapy setting. And what that does is it then has a broader team than just a therapist and a therapist with another therapist for the marriage. It has a broader base of a team for both partners, and it's usually a lot more cost effective that way. Where, in our groups, I think our monthly group is like $225 a month, whereas my hourly rate is like $200 a session. And so, if you got both people doing a ton of individual therapy and trying to do marriage therapy, it gets significantly expensive, and a lot of times the team itself of the group is more value than even a one-on-one therapist for some of my clients. But if you have that support, then you find the right therapist and you both start leaning into that and then getting some of that work going, and most therapists in our world, and I kind of fall into this, is that I wouldn't necessarily start the marriage work until there's some level of individual healing that's going on, because there's no trust that can be reestablished unless that's happening. It sounds like you're kind of in the boat of
just a quick thing. Like, what do I in that situation do when I've had couples therapists be like, it's just a waiting game to see if he's ready for couples work? Like, that's a really crappy place to be in.
It really is.
Not that I'm like, don't have issues. Like, I have got my fair share, but when it comes to being ready to work on the relationship, like, a lot of them, like, you're ready. Like, it's the waiting game of him being ready to do that too. Yeah,
it's really frustrating. And the challenge is that if you see things happening in the right direction, if he's still out keeping secrets, acting out, getting, whatever happens with, I don't know what your patterns are, angry, defensive, lying, manipulating, all of that stuff, and you don't see effort towards that change, then the waiting game truly is a waiting game, and that's going to be frustrating. But I would never encourage you to go, jump back in there right now.
Yeah.
But if you saw that he's got those things, but he's chipping away at them, and you see him making commitments and working towards, like, little bits of honesty here and a little bit more humility there, and then I would be saying to you, why don't you trust yourself enough and you have your own boundaries in your own boundaried, valued way, find ways to start leaning in there, because you see that there's work happening and it's worth leaning in. Maybe not all the way yet.
Right.
But in a boundaried way, you could actually start to do those things. You're probably not going to get to, like, deep intimacy yet.
Yeah.
But you can start moving in that direction if you see those and feel those efforts. And I would say feel really matters. Feel those efforts, that energy stuff you're talking about.
Yeah.
So, I can tell I'm leaving you in kind of still a frustrated kind of a place right now.
No, I mean, like, there's no answer. And, like, this is the therapist for you. Right. But being able to sit back and say, here's some really good, like, I don't know that the values of my therapist and I line up. Like, so I'm like, I probably need to look at that. So there definitely gave me quite a few things to look at and say, okay, this is important to make sure you're checking off the list as you're, doing it, but also like it's okay to walk away. And if you're not the right fit, so.
I think the mistake that I see a lot of my clients make is they feel like they're so afraid of conflict that they feel like they can't even break up with a therapist that isn't good for them.
See, and I'm the opposite. I'm like, conflict's fine. I almost feel like the conflict is a part of me that is a defense mechanism. So does that make sense? So I almost need the therapist to be like, that's your conflict part. Like, don't let that just walk. Like the trauma response is to just cut people out.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I feel like I'm the opposite in that way. Whereas my husband, like I was like, no, if he's not giving you what you want, it's okay to like part ways if he can't. And he really like, he went to 2 or 3 more sessions with this gentleman because he was so afraid to just
It's not right.
Yeah. So
yeah.
I think there's a lot to even unpack in that because that's, but
yeah. Well, thank you for your willingness to come on today and have a discussion. I hope there's some value when you go back and listen to it again. I hope that there'll be some things that resonate for you. And thank you for your willingness to come on and share yourself.
Yeah,
so
maybe one day I'll get both of you at the same time.
Yeah.
Really.
There you go. Yeah, that would be great. You've tried twice now, and we've had things line up that just haven't made it happen. So
because I really have had that thought. I'm like, I feel like I need both of you in your expertise in the way that you do and that's why your podcast is so beneficial, is because the two of you go back and forth with that dialectic that we don't know how to do. So I get a lot from your guys' podcast and I appreciate what you do. So
yeah, well, thank you. It's callers like you that make it good. So thank you for your willingness to come on. And for those of you guys listening, if this is beneficial or you know somebody who it would benefit, please don't hesitate to share it. And until next time, you guys keep on keeping on.